one of the most common thing in your exam from calculus will be finding the minimum or maximum, it can be called place or a point of a function. So let's have a look. The function f is defined as, so the name of the function is f, and then we are given a function. What kind of function is it? It's a quadratic function. How do I know? Because I have x to the power of 2 and x, right? So that's a quadratic function. So they are telling us use calculus to find the coordinates, meaning x and y, of what? Of local minimum point of that function f. What does that mean in the context of this question? So a graph of quadratic function we're going to have will be a parabol, isn't it? Now, I don't know if it is exactly, that's where it's going to cut the x-axis. I'm just making it up to illustrate the point. Now, this point here at the very bottom of that dip, that is our minimum point or minimum place. What will be the situation if we are talking about the maximum? This is where my graph will go the other way around. So if it goes like that, therefore here I will have the maximum point or the maximum place of the function. Okay, so how do we do that? Because it doesn't matter which of them, always we do the same thing. So first of all, we need to create a derivative of given function, right? So derivative. Then next, we take our derivative that we created and we equal that to 0. Then what do we do next? Then 3, we have to find the value of x in that particular function, or, sometimes x is not called x, it's called a different letter. But that's the idea, whatever that independent variable is. And then, because we need x and y value, to find the y value, we take that x back to the original function, so not the derivative we created, but the original function. We sub that in place of x here, in this case, and therefore we find the value of y. So those are always the steps we are taking, whether it's minimum or whether it's maximum place. Okay, so next thing, how do I find a derivative of a quadratic function? First, we have to remember that each item, and how do I know item? Item is divided by plus and minus. So each item is derived separately. So how do we work that? We apply formula to each item. What formula do we apply? We go to our table, and where we have calculus page 25, this column is telling us how our function look like, and this column will say if you have function looking like that, well, therefore, or not a function, really, an item, therefore, that's how you're going to change it. Oops, didn't want to do that. My apologies. Okay, now, so let's take that, because that's actually what we have. And for you, always is going to be only that very first formula. So if we are applying anything, if we are deriving, if we are creating a derivative, it's always going to be just that very first formula from there. Now, really, we are applying this formula only to elements where x has a power. Why? Because when I have a number on its own, doesn't matter what number, like here too, what will happen, that will become 0 in the process of differentiation, in the process of creating that derivative. When I have any number that stands beside x and it has no power, a power of 1, derivative of that will become that number that stands beside x. Yeah, so in this case, minus 20. So really, we are applying that. We're going to only to be applying when we have x to the power of 2, or sometimes we're going to have x to the power of 3. So that's the only two situations where we're going to apply. So let's do that here. So first of all, what we have is 5 here. What happens with this 5 here that is in front of x? Because this formula doesn't tell us. Well, that 5 always, or any other number, will cross over here. So it's going to be here. Then we have x, as they do. So here it will be our x. and n, my power is 2. So instead of this n, I'm going to have 2 here. That's what I have. So that means this number here will be 2. I'm just writing it few times so that we can see that, and then it will be 2 here minus 1. Okay, let's remove that now, and let's see. So that means that our 5x to the power of 2 becomes what? 5 multiplied by 2, which is 10, x, and 2 minus 1 is 1. Okay, so that's that element. Derivative of minus 20x, like we said, if we have x with no power, derivative of that is just a number that stands beside it will be minus 20, and then 2 goes to 0. So let's put our derivative together. So our f prime x will equal 10x minus 20. Okay, so we've created derivative. The next step is to equal that derivative to 0. So instead of y, because that's where we have y, we put 0. Now, what do we do next? We want to find the value of x, so have to be x on its own, numbers on the other side. So we are taking 20 to the other side. What happens when a number moves from one side of the equation to the other side of the equation? It changes the sign to the opposite. So negative becomes positive. And then we are left with 10x, which means what? 10 multiplied by x. How do we eliminate multiplication? Always the same, by dividing, and dividing both sides of the equation, because 10 divided by 10 is 1, and 1 multiplied by x is x. Then we put 20 divided by 10 in our calculator, and we get that the value of x is 2. So we have the first part of our coordinates that we were looking for. We did find the value of x is 2. What do we do now? We take that x back to the original function, not the derivative, but our function here, replace x with 2, and then calculate for the value of y. So let's do that. Our function was f, and we are saying when x is 2. So we had 5 multiplied by x. So instead of x, we have 2, and that x was taken to the power of 2, minus 20 multiply again by x, and we are saying instead of x, we put 2, and then plus 2. And what do we do now? We put all of that in our calculator, we press equal, and we have our value of y, minus 18. That means that the value of x is 2, and value of y and 18. Those are the coordinates of our minimum point. Yeah. So in your exam question, it can be called minimum, maximum, or latest, or greatest, or any other word that will indicate, that will be synonymous for minimum and maximum value of the function. But we always do the same steps. We first create derivative, we equal that derivative to 0, we then find the value of x, then we take x back to the original function to find the value of y. That is a very common thing to do in your Leaving Cert. It's always, I would say, probably is there every year.